There is real evidence for the existence of a God, and to stop folks from going crazy, J. Warner Wallace is here to explain where to find that very real evidence. Although he may be lying about some things along the way, but never fear, we're all here to say why J. Warner Wallace might not be quite right in his assertions. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims, and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying. Sometimes it takes a homicide detective to demonstrate the God that they believe in, because they deal with evidence all the time, right? Well, perhaps not. And it might take a British dumbnut to point out why J. Warner Wallace here is talking a load of baloney. He's trying to give theists the evidence for God so they don't feel crazy. Is that because the evidence is so abstract that it could possibly turn someone into a crazy loon? Well, before we see how crazy this evidence can be, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell, and let's make the algorithm go crazy. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos. Joji Doobie, Real Pumpkin J, H5N1 and Co KG, Condor Boss, Chris Clomo, and Megatron Jenkins. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Right, make me crazy with this evidence then, J-Woa.
Is there really no evidence for God's existence?
I mean, so far I'd say not. Otherwise, it'd be proven that there is one, right? And more specifically, your God, because I guess that's the one you're speaking up for.
I think in a world in which people are most persuaded by scientific quote-unquote claims, right? I mean, science is the arbiter of all truth in the culture we're living today.
Why quote-unquote that? Trying to belittle it or what? You might as well use air quotes when talking about faith, because faith is at least a terrible way to discern truth.
And I hear this all the time. Well, you cannot prove God's existence with evidence. It's really?
I think what you mean is there's not substantial evidence for the existence of a God. All it would take is some very convincing evidence to prove a God.
Is that true? Is there no evidence for the existence of God?
So far, I guess not.
Well, I learned one thing working criminal trials. There's only two forms of evidence, right? There's direct evidence and indirect evidence. That's it. That's every form of evidence that we use when making a case in front of a jury. Direct and indirect evidence. Now, direct evidence is of one kind. It is eyewitness testimony. If it's not an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, who did it, it can describe the entire event for you, then you can't use direct evidence. Now, indirect evidence is everything else. And in cases like mine, DNA evidence, that's indirect. Fingerprints, indirect evidence. Behaviors people observed, indirect evidence. Statements he made, indirect evidence.
So wait a minute, do you have a God's fingerprints and DNA? I know there are stories of people seeing a God, but if you're going down that route, I can give testimony of seeing Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe leaf be upon her, and all of a sudden, that's direct evidence. I guess this form of evidence isn't how you demonstrate God's, though.
Unless it's an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, everything else is indirect evidence. By the way, there's no such category as hard evidence, so please stop saying that.
Thank goodness, because there's definitely none of that for any of the gods. Saves us a job.
We don't have hard evidence and soft evidence. There's direct evidence and indirect evidence. Now,
at least in law, but it's not lawful or unlawful for a god to exist. It's an extraordinary claim, so you'd better have some extraordinary evidence to back up that claim to stop us all going crazy here.
Could we make a case for God's existence from direct and indirect evidence? I think you could.
Nope, I don't think you can. But go on, let's hear it.
Direct evidence might include, for example, eyewitness accounts. Even if they're written down over a period of time, we have 4 Gospels that provide us with direct evidence, eyewitness accounts, and we can test those. But that's one way to determine, by the way, if there's a person historically who rose from the grave with the power of God, and you have an eyewitness account that chronicles that, and if you test the eyewitness account and it passes all with flying colors, why would you not consider that to be sufficient evidence to believe that God exists?
Because one, the different accounts tell different stories that don't line up, which obviously you know wouldn't count working in law and everything, right? And two, it's written that 500 people saw Jesus had resurrected. No names, no direct quotes. I could bloody well write that 501 people saw that Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, came back from the dead after 4 days. And that's way more impressive than the Goddy GB story, and I'd be smart enough to include names. In fact, we can make that happen now. 501 at least comments saying, I saw Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, come back from the dead. We've instantly beaten Christianity then.
But If that's not the way you want to go, and you want to go with indirect evidence, well, hey, we're in a universe where all space, time, and matter leapt into existence from nothing. That universe that resulted appears to be fine-tuned to a razor's edge for the existence of life.
Actually, does it? Because if things were different, perhaps, life would just be different. And hopefully that life wouldn't end up saying that everything exists because of magic men in the sky.
Not only that, life emerges from non-life in a way that is still yet, no one can explain that even now. There are origin of life studies that still cannot explain how life emerges from non-life.
Yes, there is. They can. The Urey-Miller experiment demonstrates how chemicals react in early Earth conditions to get those simple little molecules to self-assemble into complex organic thingies.
And when it does emerge, it has a very commonly held observation that biology displays at least the signs of design, the attributes of the appearance of design.
I harp on about this a lot, as do many other creators, so feel free to sift through my other content, but there is a lot of terrible stuff in the human body which is the opposite of clever design. External testicles and windpipe/food pipe combination being two of my favourites.
But also, we're in a universe in which we have minds that act freely. We are in a universe that has objective, transcendent moral truths. We are in a universe in which we sense the presence of evil or the existence of evil.
Do we? I haven't sensed any evil to my knowledge. Maybe my evil dar is broken, or it's been replaced with a BS-ometer, which, by the way, is buzzing like crazy right now.
And we have to have some type of high moral standard of righteousness to even detect such a thing. Look, these are indirect attributes of the universe that we could make a case. We could use these as evidence to make a case for the existence of God.
All right, I don't accept any of that. But let's, just for shits and giggles, say that all those little things did in fact demonstrate a God. How do you know it's your God?
Because it turns out that if there is a God, he is the best explanation for those attributes of the universe. And that's all we're trying to do in a crime scene, right? Is figure out which suspect will best explain the evidence in our crime scene. It turns out that you can make a case for God from both the direct and indirect evidence.
I could do that with my deity too, and given your standards, you'd have to accept mine as true as well.
Let me give you another way of thinking about this. What kind of evidence would even suffice?
Hard evidence. Oh, crap, sorry, we can't say that. Never mind, J. Wally, carry on.
What are we really looking for here? I always ask that question because if what they want, if what they need is for God to come right now and act miraculously in this moment and write their name in the stars or write their name on the side of the mountain, well, I can't make that happen for you. So,
no ambiguous things for me. A God would know what it would take to convince me of its existence, surely. I think I'm at the stage of a God needing to just appear in front of me, do an outstanding miracle, something that could be repeated over and over from every angle to show it was actually supernatural, and then I'd accept it did indeed exist. If it was the Christian God, there's no way I'd worship it, but I would acknowledge it existed for sure.
I don't think we can have a productive conversation if that's the kind of evidence you need. But I think we could look at attributes of the universe and ask specific questions and see if the best inference is not a what as a cause, but a who. So, for example, as I look at the information in DNA.
What information in DNA? Please demonstrate the exact information you think is there, because you know these folks think that it's like text inside every human.
And I see how those nucleotides are arranged in that longest molecule known to humans, DNA. And I see that information, those nucleotides are arranged in a code that is informative, that is information. And I realize from all my past experiences anywhere that information always comes from the mind of an intelligent being.
It's just the best explanation to help describe how DNA works. There's no actual code. There are no letters in DNA. What science does is use them chemicals, what is found in DNA, and use a letter to represent those chemicals. The letters could at any point be changed, and the way DNA works would be exactly the same. You could change it to 4 types of bird to represent the 4 chemicals, which would be nonsense, and DNA would still do the exact same thing.
Why would I not then look for a who to explain the information in DNA? Let me put it to you this way. If I walked into a crime scene and there was a struggle in this crime scene and the the suspect killed the victim here. And sure enough, there is blood spatter on the wall where the murder occurred. That spatter pattern I can attribute to the physics of blood and gravity and action that caused the blood spatter on the wall. I could explain that with nothing more than physics. But if I walked into the same room and instead of there being blood spatter on the wall, there was written in this victim's blood, he deserved it on the wall. Now I'm not looking for a what. It's not physics that caused that. I'm looking for a who, because that information and that sequence of code we call language, right? The English language, if it's written in English, that has to come not from physics, but from a mind.
Hold on. In scenario 1, are you saying that physics murdered someone? You're not still a detective, are you? Please tell me you have another job, because that is terrible detective work.
We are seeing information in DNA, and we know by practical experience it always comes from mind.
But we're not seeing that.
Why would we not look for a who in explaining DNA? By the way, a very famous atheist named Antony Flew, one of the most famous atheists of the last century, before he died, moved from atheism to at least deism or theism on the basis of one thing: information in DNA.
Doesn't make him right, though. Not understanding something, therefore a god, doesn't mean a god. He also said he became atheist too soon and for the wrong reasons as the son of a Methodist minister. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case, but maybe we had a rebellious teen that talked himself out of it after a few decades.
Even Antony Flew decided at some point it was not reasonable to answer that, to look for a cause that was a what. He knew the only cause that could cause information in DNA was a who. So yes, you actually can use the world around us and evidence in the world around us to infer that the most reasonable explanation for that evidence is the existence of God.
For him, but not for countless others. I'm not convinced, so I'm still atheist.
Is believing in God like believing in the flying spaghetti monster? When I hear skeptics online mock or poke fun at believers, Christians, or any kind of theist, you'll often hear them say that believing in God is like believing in the flying spaghetti monster. This flying spaghetti monster as a notion has been offered as kind of a substitute for God. And it was first really created by a guy named Bobby Henderson in 2005. He also created a kind of a larger view called pastafarianism.
Not as popular around these parts as giraffism, but that's another story.
And really, this was created by Bobby in response to the Kansas school district, where he saw that intelligent design, a notion of creation that comes from the mind of a designer to explain the features of the cosmos, the features of biology. He saw that emerging in his local school district, and he decided to offer this alternative and to claim that believing in God is as ridiculous as believing in the flying spaghetti monster.
Or a cosmic rainbow deity that poops the universe into existence.
But let's be clear about one thing. Bobby does not believe in the flying spaghetti monster any more than he believes in God. This was really just a notion that was invented to kind of make the distinction, to make a case against God.
Or to show that you can change the word God to anything, especially something ridiculous, to demonstrate how silly belief in the undemonstrated really is.
And although he's applied in a number of countries for pastafarianism as a recognized national religion, he's been denied everywhere he applied. Why? Why would that be the case?
Because Jedi already has that spot? Or, fine, maybe Satanists. You know, perhaps giraffism does need to become more widespread. Show your support for Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe. Leave be upon her today. Check out the shop below this video to find your very own Lisa t-shirt.
Well, in large part because people understand and governments understand and nations understand the difference between religious claims and fictional claims.
He just said the same thing twice, right?
We have good evidence to demonstrate that Christianity is true from both the direct evidence of eyewitness accounts and the indirect evidence of features of the universe that demonstrate that God exists.
No, you don't. Unless I missed it somewhere, you have the same tired arguments that have been talked about in hundreds, if not thousands of videos all over the interwebs.
It's not as though we're just picking a notion out of thin air and describing it in such a way that we want everyone to believe. But no, this is the great thing about Christianity. Christianity is not just a claim, an unattached claim, a set of proposals about God. No, Christianity is a claim about a historical event that can be tested, the way that other historical events can be tested.
How? You can test that 4 testimonies from different people really do align, and that 500 people really did see a resurrected Jeebus. That's news to billions of people who don't accept Christianity.
Look, I will tell you that there are certain kind of fortune cookie type of religious claims, maybe a set of just proverbs that people will look at and say, these are the beautiful teachings of Buddha or Baha'u'llah. But these do not describe an event that's rooted in history, like the resurrection.
Nah, mate, there may have been a man called Jesus who told people he was the son of a god, but there is nothing substantial to demonstrate the claim that the resurrection of Cheez-Its Crisp actually happened. Absolutely nothing. No shrouds. No 500 people. No blood of Christ. Zero.
That is the claim of Christianity. It makes Christianity very different than any other kind of religious claim. It's not as though people thought up, well, let's just think of a crazy character like the flying spaghetti monster. No, it's that something happened in the course of history that people observed and wrote about. And we have that direct evidence claim to review thousands of years later.
Well, it's only a couple of thousand years, really. But what about the documented history of humanity that predates Christianity? Why didn't the God have popularity then? Seems a little sus to me, bud, that the correct religion has only been around for a couple of thousand years, whilst humanity has been around much longer. And fun fact, pasta dates back to as far as the 4th century BCE, where an Etruscan tomb shows natives making what appeared to be pasta. Pasta is older than Jeebus.
That is very different. Can you see the difference between fictional notions that are not rooted in history and claims for which we have an historical record?
Man, I wish he knew that pasta fact.
If we can't see that distinction, it's going to be hard to advance any conversation about the nature of God or Christianity. The claims related to the flying spaghetti monster are by their very nature very different than the claims related to Christianity.
Are they, though? To be fair, you might be right. Nobody really thinks that the flying spaghetti monster's real. And I'm not sure anything here would have made me crazy, but also, I'm not going crazy at not having answers either. I'm very much just meh at what J Double Dubs had to say. But the biggest revelation is that pastafarianism predates Christianity, if you think about it. To be fair, though, giraffes appear to have arisen in some form around 1 million years ago. I'm not saying that giraffism is true, but maybe I am a bit. What did you think of what J-Man had to say? Let me know in the section below. I'm going to skeptic this as maybe Wally Warn dude being a little bit crazy. A big thanks to this month's top level ticks on Patreon. Jerry, Dark Ether Piao, Tamo, The Barely Bearable Atheist, George, Godless Granny, Addy Rockhart, The Enixes, Jakari, Elizabeth, Whiskey Tech Fred and Rick, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.